everyone, good evening. Welcome to yet another episode of Talks with Ambassador. This time it's going to be Peter Bambosek. Peter, welcome in the studio.
Hello, I have to stop my YouTube channel because I hear us 2 times. so now it's fixed.
Right.
It's okay.
Okay, good, perfect. So today we are going to talk with Peter Bambosek. Peter is a Czech professional wildlife photographer. You have probably seen his webpage, which is sulasula.com. I will later on put it into the link. And Peter has been shooting wildlife for how long, Peter? Can you tell us how long have you been shooting wildlife and animals and birds?
Yes, I've been wildlife photographer for more than 20 years, starting this year.
More than 20 years. Oh gosh. So basically you were born with your camera already.
I'm not 20 years old. I've been wildlife photographer 20 years. So okay. I didn't know that I have this ability for 20 years of my life. And after, suddenly happens.
Okay, good. Great. Perfect. So today, basically, you have actually been in Costa Rica recently. This was like your last trip with Olympus and OM system cameras, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
Basically, it will be about Costa Rica, but you also are going to show us some images from the new 90mm macro lens. Am I correct?
Yes, exactly. That's true. It was my 7th trip to Costa Rica. I try to return to my favorite places all the time. So I try to make the trip slightly different. So I will discuss it later. Of course, my talk or lecture will be split to 2 different parts. When the first part will be fully dedicated to the birds and the other stuff which we photographed. I have a lot of stories behind my latest pictures. And the second part will be focused on 90mm macro, which I was pleasure to have with me. And I will share my experiences and, of course, a lot of pictures I took on the trip.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Peter. So we are all looking forward to it. But before we go ahead, and before you start with your presentation and your wonderful images, I strongly encourage you, please put your comments, your questions into the chat, and I will go through it as we talk. And obviously, if there are some questions, I will just put them into the talk immediately, and some of them will probably try to reply at the very end. I hope there is going to be nice and lots of interesting questions. And obviously, we are going to see nice, wonderful images. So, Peter, I'll probably switch to your presentation, which is this one.
Okay, I can see that you are not seeing these pictures full frame. So I would like to make a small change. Just a second.
And in the meantime, I'm just looking at the chat, and I would like to welcome you all. You are from all around the world, as I see. There's Nebraska, there's Kensington. There's my wife and I got to Costa Rica in January 2000. Oh, you are going so Phil, you are going to Costa Rica. So please watch and listen carefully, because if you're going to shoot and use your lenses, which you mentioned there, 1240, 4150, and 100 to 400, definitely you will learn some lessons from Peter today. But to your questions, it's all about animals. Costa Rica is about animals, but also landscape. That's true. So basically, you will use all these 3 lenses which you are mentioning here. Absolutely.
So yes, it seems that it's already fixed. So
I already see it. Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Perfect.
So
go ahead, please.
First thing is my presentation. So let me start with the just short introduction of myself. I've been a wildlife photographer for more than 20 years. And since 2017, I travel exclusively with my Olympus or OM system gears. And here it is, the latest Costa Rica 2023 was my 20th expedition with the Olympus or OM system gear. So you can see the overview of all my trips I took, and I point my 4 trips to Costa Rica with OM system gears by red letters, so you can see where exactly it was placed during my trips across the globe. I traveled a lot in Borneo, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and in the other beautiful parts of our planet. So the last trip
Peter,
was
sorry to interrupt you, which means that Tenerife, the first one, must have been sometimes 2016 or 17, because this was the time.
January 17th.
Yeah, this was the time when you switched to EM1 Mark II, right?
Yeah, I switched to EM1 Mark II on December 2016, and after some tries, I traveled with my family to Tenerife. It was my first trip, and honestly, I returned there 3 months later. So I've been there 2 times, and then Ecuador, Malaysia came, and everything starts, and it was brilliant to go with this gear.
Perfect.
So I will explain at the first moment why I return to Costa Rica all the time, why I repeat all my trips. It's all because the Costa Rica is a beautiful country. It has great biodiversity, and you can focus on different kind of topics. You can focus for the landscapes. You can focus for birds, of course. It's very special for birds. It has many biomes and biotopes, and you can find a lot of animals which you will not find in such a small country across the globe. It's very special and unique. And we also start during this trip to photograph by the landscapes, because waterfalls in Costa Rica are very special. They are not just beautiful, but accessible, which is one of the advantages of waterfalls in Costa Rica. But the drawback of this part of this trip was the weather. I traveled there on January, from 1st January to 23rd, I guess. And it was the most wet trip ever. It rains all the time. And we also visited beautiful Tenorio waterfall, which you can see. It's Rio Celeste. It has this beautiful Turkish color. But if Thomas will share my first video, not with a toucan, but with a waterfall, you will see the conditions in which the photographs were taken. So please play from beginning. I will try. Yes, that's it. So these are the background conditions of this picture, and it is high pressure on. It was high pressure on our gear. So luckily, OM system gear, including the lenses and the cameras, are okay. They are not much fighting with rain. But for us, it was much more tough, because we are not waterproof. We have no guarantee not to share some water. So it was hard to take some pictures during this trip. But it has some advantages, of course, because the birds, especially, were usually in a surrounding of the rains, which is great for pictures. Usually, if you travel to Costa Rica or Ecuador or Colombia at these times, most of the trips are focused on bird photography and bird feeder photography. So it means that you sit in any perfect placed lodge or perfect placed place where is the feeding part, and the birds are coming to you and you are photographing. And this is the example of this first part of these pictures. But after 7 trips to Costa Rica and after many trips to Ecuador and these kind of destinations, I found that this kind of photography is kind of a little bit boring for me. But not. I'm really happy to have pictures from these feeding stations. But I try to avoid to have the trip again based on feeding stations. So the only first few pictures you will see are from the feeding stations, and all the other are pure wild, nature wild. But the advantage of feeding station is that you have opportunities to try some special techniques. For example, the toucans in the rain, they are shaking time to time because they feel wet and they would like to remove all the unnecessary water from their bodies. And I use for this particular motive my very favorite tool or feature, which is ProCapture. I guess you all, if you use OM system, you know what OM ProCapture means. Just to repeat very shortly, it's if you half press your shutter button, it saves certain number of pictures in a memory, and after you press the shutter button, the pictures from memory are also saved, which means if you are waiting for a particular moment in this situation, staying toucans, not moving toucans, and you are waiting just for the moment of 1 second shake, and it's more or less 1 second, but you don't know when it happens. So this is exactly the perfect way how to use your ProCapture. And if Thomas will share the second video, there is a few ProCapture series I took with toucans.
Here it comes.
So this is how it looks on your camera. These pictures are not video. These are pictures from the series in RAW, in full RAW. So I can choose the particular image which I like, and I can get very special angle of the toucan. I used, I guess, 100 frames per second for this session. So I have a lot of pictures to choose from. I have to delete most of them because I only keep the good ones. But the great part is that you have a lot of pictures to choose from. So that's the idea of it.
Just one comment from my side, which I have to tell you about Peter. The images that Peter erases are the ones that most of us would keep, you know. So he really chooses, out of hundreds of images, he really chooses just one, the very best one, and the rest is deleted. While I would, for example, keep at least another 50, you know. But yes.
Yeah, that's based on my experiences. I never used the other pictures than I chose for a first time. I have a lot of ProCapture series, and after I choose the best pictures, 1, 2, 4, let's say, I never try to go through all the pictures again and found maybe some lost and even better than 4 or 5 before. So this is just my experience and limitation of my hard drive. The other topic I focused during this trip on was birds in flight. I try to tune my cameras as much as possible in terms that I have all necessary modes available on a single press of particular button. I assign these functions to particular buttons under custom modes C1 or 2, 3, 4. And in a situation where the toucan is waiting for takeoff and flying for the banana feeder, I have opportunity to photograph these moments. So I can easily switch from ordinary photographs to ProCapture photographs. After I see that toucan is ready for fly, I just switch my camera to my tune-up birds in flight mode, and it's perfectly versatile for any types of shots. So there are just 2 examples of the images I took during this trip. And it's a little bit tricky because toucans don't understand that I'm waiting for a particular moment of the takeoff and shape of the wings. So if you ever try to photograph toucans in flight, even on a feeder, it's hard to pretend the moment where the toucan really will start and fly. So I try to understand the behavior of the birds and pretend right now it happens. And even after this, I still miss a lot of flights because the toucan unexpectedly started, and in the other part, he didn't start at all. So I have some empty pictures because he didn't start. But yes, I get a lot of series of flying toucans, and I took, I guess, 3 or 4 pictures I wished to. So I also deleted the rest because I don't really need to keep all the pictures. So the other topic I photographed was backlight photography. I really like it. And in a particular situations like strong backlight and dark background, you can adjust your camera to -2, -3 EV and try to use some backlight shots. And I like it very much for impressive expression. We have also a great chance to photograph wild-lived macaws, the green macaws. It was my first time I can photograph them so close. In the past, I visited a farm where they are kept and they are posing for photographers, but I have to say this wild opportunity was much better for me. And this is a short excuse to our first destination. It was feeding stations, and the other part of the trip was pure wildlife. As I mentioned, this time the Costa Rica was very wet, at least at the part we were living. So it was in Caño Negro wetland. There was maybe 2 days of rain out of 4 we stayed there. And there were a lot of places which were flooded. So we have to find a particular place where the birds are concentrated. And luckily we found one very nice one. And here's our small group. We found the place where the white herons and wood storks and the other snowy herons, egrets, I'm sorry, snowy egrets, hunted from the little pool. And the trick was that these birds were shy to go to more deeper water. So after a while, they started to hunt from the flight. So here you can see the concentration of the birds at the bank of this small pool. In the front of the birds, you can see 3 or 4 heads of caimans living in the water, fishing as well. And these white egrets were waiting for a particular moment when they see some movements in the water. And after that, they start to fish. So here is an example of the bank fishing egrets and some moments from this particular situation. And this is the egret fishing from the flight. So after a few birds seen this technique of catching the fish, they started to fly there and back and over, and they were hunting all the fishes from the flight. So we have a lot of opportunities to try our birds in flight presets, and it was really fun part of the trip. There are also a lot of different water birds. This is Anahinga, which was unexpectedly familiar with us. So I approached this Anahinga just by walking by the bank of the small lagoon. And I noticed Anahinga by the sound. So I stopped for a while and I came closer and closer. And this is full framed picture, no crop of posing Anahinga. It was a perfect moment for me. Another bird which we encountered was spoonbills. Of course, these songbirds are very common in Costa Rica, in wetlands especially. We also found...
Sorry to interrupt you, because there is one question which I think just fits perfectly at the moment because you just mentioned that there was not that much crop. Steve is asking, your location looks fairly distant. How much crop are you doing on these images? In general, how much crop do you do on your images?
In general, I try to frame my pictures for full frame shot. I usually don't crop much. If I say it's sometimes it's 10%, sometimes if it's crazy, so it's 15%, but mostly it's full image. I really try to compose the pictures for a full image. Luckily, I have the huge lens, 150 to 400 with extender, so I have in a Recount 2 full frame 1000 millimeter, so it's still enough to get most of my pictures uncropped. So that's the reason why I use all the zoom lens of my lens.
By the way, I just need to spread the rumor, because probably the English-speaking people don't know yet. But Peter was the one who actually started calling this 150 to 400 millimeter lens a white Gandalf.
Yes.
And basically every single wildlife photographer here in Czech using Olympus and OM system equipment just calls it white Gandalf. So yeah, if you tend to actually retake this information or calling the lens white Gandalf, we'll be very happy to. But obviously it's just
yeah, it's because I call it because it's a kind of wizard. It's a magic lens. quite different to all of the lenses I used before, even in OM system, even with the brands before, because it's so versatile, so light, so incredibly zoom potential from 300 count to 1000. That's very hard to get something out of this range in terms of bird photography. So I prefer this. Or on the other hand, on this picture, there is a kingfisher sitting on the last light of the day in a huge trees, and I keep it like this. It's also full frame, no crop. Sometimes I use the context picture to make the collection of the more portrait-oriented pictures, and it makes the diversity of the portfolio. So I prefer also these pictures as well. Here are also examples, some wading birds. It's this is tiger heron, which is photographed from the same bank as I photographed the kingfisher before, but this one came to me on the same bank. I have a great rememberings for this picture, this scenery, because before I traveled to Costa Rica, and not just this trip, I mean, whenever I travel there, I have a vision to photograph tiger heron on rapid running creek. They prefer to stay on the stones, motionless, and the creek is going around rapidly. So it's perfect situation for using long exposure in combination with motionless egret or heron in this example. And finally, I found a place where the tiger herons were active on these creeks, and it was possible to make a picture. So after we came to our lodge, I stopped for a while on the bridge and say, okay, there is a tiger heron. I will come back later and I will just try to make my picture I dreamt of. So I came to this place in the riverbank and waited for my picture. The tiger heron stands somewhere here in the middle, and it was in a perfect position for taking the picture. But I don't know why. After I sit down, another tiger heron came, fight with the staying tiger heron on the perfect place, and they both disappear. I said, okay. So I just hoped it will not take more than 10 or 15 minutes to come back. It took 4 hours until the tiger heron came back to this place. And I spent all 4 hours sitting there on the roots, waiting for my moment. And after 4 hours, finally the tiger heron stayed there, and I took, I think, 100 of pictures with long exposure on different zoom, set it on my camera. Here is one of the pictures I prefer because it's small tiger heron in a beautiful scenery of the river. And I also have a more detailed one. And I also have 20 another different angles and another different ways how I shoot it. The
Peter, sorry, I just have to put one more comment into the chat, because Bernard is saying exactly what I always say. Wildlife photographers, and especially when I hear it from you, I mean, you must have incredible patience, because this is 4 hours waiting. I remember one of your other shots was just a butterfly, and you were waiting a couple of hours for the butterfly to open the wings.
Yes.
You know, just for that, which happened within a split of a second, and then as far as I remember, he just closed it down immediately. You know, and you have been waiting for this moment for 3 or 4 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unbelievable, really. I mean, I would just run away after 10 minutes.
It means if I have an idea, if I know what I would like to take as a picture, I have great patience. I'm patient as a sleeping sloth, for example. This is another example where one have to be very patient if he would like to take a active sloth after he's sleeping for a couple of hours. So he just open eyes and close again, and you don't miss this moment.
Yeah.
But if there is a situation I'm not prepared for, or which is not my favorite, I'm really not much patient. In this, for example, in a store when I stay in some queue, and I'm second in the row, and the first person in front of me has some problem, and it prolongs all the situation for 20 minutes. I'm crazy. But sitting on the bank waiting for my picture I imaged before, it's no problem to stay there for a couple of hours. It's okay.
Right. By the way, to this image, there is one more
Huh?
question. What shutter speed? Do you remember what was the shutter speed on this Tiger Heron?
I don't remember, but if you wait for a moment, I hope you don't see my. You just see the Tiger Heron, right?
Yeah, we just see the Tiger Heron.
Correct. So
Because the water is nicely blurred, right?
yeah,
so it was
yeah.
a longer
And of
exposure.
course, I didn't mention these blurred pictures were taken with internal ND filter,
Like
because
ND.
it was high highlights all around, because it was, I don't know, 4 p.m. and it was still enough. But I just checked my original picture, and it is 3 seconds. This particular is 3 seconds.
Mhm.
Of course, in this series, there were few pictures which were blur, of course, but most of the pictures, I think I have sharp picture for on 8 seconds, sharp tiger heron. But sometimes the tiger heron just jump to the other stone during the exposure. Sometimes they just clean the feathers, so it takes few tries. And to get the sharp picture as this one, I of course use the tripod. And for this particular moment where I found the tiger heron is still, I didn't have my remote control. It was my mistake. So I used the self shutter customized for taking 10 pictures in a row. So after one picture was taken, after half a second was taken, and so and so. So that's also the reason why it's so sharp, because it was taken across the, I don't know, 100 meters, or I hardly can count the meters I took for, but from the image before, you can see the distance. It was something like there. So it's 60, 70 meters, maybe something. So every single touch of the camera would shake it. All the system would be shaken. So I use this feature for getting as sharp as possible.
Amazing.
I just mentioned the kingfishers before, so we found two lovely kingfishers on Cayo Negro Lagoon. As I noticed, this is very favorite place for sitting. It's a pair. The left one is male, the right is female, and they were fishing just on the sign. It was very fun to see them so cool and focused on the fishes. The other part of the trip took us from the wetlands to the forest, of course. And here is the situation. I tried to photograph two owls. Here in this part of the image, there are two beautiful owls. But you can notice they are in the middle of the forest. It's very hard to get some nice shot. But this crested owl is very special for me. I saw it first time during the day. So this opportunity cannot be missed. So it's my very favorite pair of crested owls. I also found accidentally one owl in the middle of the lodge. This owl came to the restaurant fence, sitting there and waiting for some insects attracted by surrounded lamps or lights, night lights. And after I noticed the owl was how to say, it was surprised that she see me, and she flew away for the next balcony of the room on opposite part of the lodge. So I took all my stuff, and after I took ordinary picture of the full framed owl across the whole image, I said no, I'll try something different. So I placed my camera with wide angle lens, and I tried to compose the picture, including the full moon, which was rising, and where the clouds were coming across. And this picture was a little bit tricky in terms of lighting, because the moon makes some lightings, the surrounding lamps make some lights, and I have to lighten also the owl because it will be totally dark if I will not lighten it separately. So I used a lifetime mode for night photography, and I took the picture in for me, simple way. I press the button for start exposure. After I press the button, I move as close to the owl as possible, and I started with my flash. I hold my flash in my hand, so it was remotely flashed, and I returned back to my camera, waited for the final exposure balance with my flash exposure, and after I stopped making the picture. So this is the way how I took this picture, and this is also a different approach to the ordinary situation.
Mhm.
One of the part of Costa Rican workshops or my trips is photographing of the bats. At this particular moment, I used 4 external flashes, remotely flashed, and in this particular situation, I try to make some backlight because I have a lot of normally exposed pictures. So I place the flashes to make a backlight scenery, and it looks very natural, I guess. Even it's a 100% artificial situation. This happened in Costa Rica. This happened in the trees. But if you wish to photograph it, you have to either climb to the trees, prepare the flashes out there. It's my very favorite way how to make it. But during the leading of the workshop, I prefer to make all the setup by myself, including the flashes, and enjoy the situation like this. Well, and speaking of bats, not far from the house, there was a very special place for Nicaraguan white bats. These white bats are sleeping during the day in a specially shaped leaf of heliconia, and this is the leaf. And beneath the leaf, you can see how they manage to make the leaf to be more closed than normally. And if you look through the leaves, you can see the ears and heads of the bats. And this is the frontal exposure of the bats hiding behind the leaf. By the way, this picture was taken with a 90mm macro. I prefer this because I can keep the distance from the bats. It has close focus distance enough for this picture, and I didn't disturb them well.
I have to admit, Peter, that this is the first time I see white bats, actually, because I always think that bats should be black or gray or some dark color, but they are white. I mean, amazing.
Yeah, they are white with beautiful faces, and this is a wide-angle shot with the surrounding forest from below of the leaf. It's lightened by a small LED lamp, no flash, just LED, and it's taken with 6mm Laowa, which was also very special lens I have along with. So this is the final part of my not macro part of the trip. So this was the trip with my very favorite lens, 150 and 400. Here it is. As I travel in February, so I accidentally travel during the Valentine time, and a lot of lodges has some setup for photograph yourself as a Valentine lover. So I've been photographing my Gandalf lens.
Yeah, I just have to explain before we go to the 90mm macro part of your presentation that it's not white on the picture, but basically it's because you have it camouflaged, right? You bought some camouflage for it, and you made it.
Yeah, I call it white Gandalf, but it's hidden under the self-stick camouflage. I covered my lens. It's one of the way how to make it less visible if you photograph wild animals. Of course, they are not really happy with the white colors, so it's good to have some kind of camouflage.
Let's see, two more questions before we head to 90mm.
Yeah.
One is from Jürgen. What kind of editing are you performing on your pictures?
Yes, I 100% shoot in RAW, so I never shoot in different formats like a JPEG. And I edit my RAW by Capture One. This is my main RAW editor. And if it's necessary, if there is a high ISO used, I run the pictures through DxO Photolab 6, or now it's DxO PureRAW 3. But I prefer Photolab 6 because it has the same results, but it has some possibilities of tweaking the settings, so the pictures are not so over sharpened after they are managed to DNG. But after that, I continue to Capture One, and sometimes I finish the picture in Photoshop with Nik Collection.
Right. And two questions which we can combine together. One is, after this trip, were there things in your book that you plan to modify? And the second, which is basically accompanying it, do you do a lot of prior scouting when you do trips and then go to specific locations for your pictures? So how do you plan your trips?
Oh yes, it is very hard to pretend what happens in a particular place of the world if you plan the trips a long time ahead. So I mostly plan my trips 6 or 7 months ahead. I book my lodges and I book my flight ticket, and what happens, it happens. I never regret that I have to wait for more. I have to go to different places. It maybe will be better or something. I try to use what offers the nature to me for my nature photography. So, of course, it was rainy. It was windy in one part, together with rainy. So the weather was crazy just for walking, not for photography, because most of the animals, birds especially, were hidden and among the trees, and they didn't show us. And of course, we missed something special, but I try to avoid to regret that I have that planning or something. I try to focus what the nature offers to us and use it for 100%. So I think I never regret any step I did. I never regret if I have to go to right or left and I choose the left part. I never say, oh, maybe on the right was better choice before. No. This is not my style. I try to do whatever happens. And in fact, in tropics during the 2 weeks, I have more opportunities than in my country for the whole year. So I try to be very optimistic in the way of judging the places particular. And what was the second question? Or I don't know if I.
Well, basically, it was about the planning, whether you do prior scouting, going to the locations, So it's similar.
Yes, the prior scouting is necessary. Some tour operators or tour leaders make some precisely organized pre-scouting trips. They spend maybe 3-4 weeks for just scouting different places and judge if it's okay for travel and photography. I do it by myself, usually 1 or 2 times a year. That after my trip, I say goodbye to my participants, and I stay in the country for next week, and I have opportunity to try 2 or 3 more different places. But the fact is, if I found the place, I spend there 4-5 nights in a row, which makes possible to wait for one single picture of tiger heron for 5 hours. If I would be there for just 2 nights, I have to say, no, it's too much waiting. I have no time for this. I have to search for something different. And this also makes the trips different if you stay in one place for 5 nights or doing 5 nights in 3 places, because you are not pressed to photograph as much as possible from a single place in a single day. And it pushed the trips to be more feeder oriented, because you have almost guarantee that you have some pictures of the birds, but it usually push you to stay in the middle of the lodge don't visit much the other localities, and don't allow some unsuccessful side trips. And I have to say, more and more, I wish to go to any side trips and look what is exactly around. But the fact is that I'm not focusing just for birds. If I would photograph just the birds, maybe I will try a different approach. But if you will see the second part of this lecture or this talk, you will see that the birds are just a split of what I'm photographing in the tropics. So if the birds are hidden, I focus for lizards or frogs or insects. And that's the second part of this speak.
Right. And just before we go there, very last question to this part. You have basically partially answered already. Are most of your shots from heights or blinds, or do you do stalking? So you said that it's the feeders for the birds, right? That sometimes you use, but you also walk around.
Yeah, it all depends on particular subject. I have to say, in the tropics, the birds are very familiar with people. So, for example, the toucans I photograph on the feeder are just 6 meters away from me, or 7 meters, or something like this. So it's very, very close. In a wild nature, in a Costa Rica, the trees are 30 meters high, and the toucans prefer the higher parts of the trees. So usually you have distance to normal, regular white toucan, I don't know, 40 meters, and it's hard to get some memorable picture. But it's more wild than the feeder picture, of course. So it all depends. I used in the tropics in Thailand, I use a height for photographing pitas, hooded pita. And I don't remember more heights in the tropics I used in the past. I usually walk and sit and wait. In a Pantanal, for example, you just sit by any pool and wait for 1 hour, and you will see always something happens. So I prefer walk, stay, wait for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and walk there. If I have no particular target, this is the best way how to see the enriched life around.
Great. Perfect, Peter. We'll get back to another questions at the end of the presentation. So now go ahead and show us some 90mm macro Costa Rican images.
Yeah. So the other part, or it was mixed, of course, it was just 2 days by birds and the other days without the birds. But the other part of my photography trips is focused for small stuff like lizards, frogs, insects. And it all happens mostly in a forest, deep in the forest. So as you can see, it's usually wet. It's usually very dark. It's very dirty, because after the rain, you are walking not just on a clean pathway, but a very muddy pathway. So in the forest, you have to deal with many, many things. Sometimes it happens that if you are walking through the forest, you will see nothing from the stuff you would like to photograph, and you approach your home in your lodge, and in the front of your lodge there is the target you have for the day walk. So this is an example of the lizard. It's an Anolis lizard, which was right in the front of our doorsteps. The bad part is, even if it's so close, so beautiful, it's almost impossible to make a nice picture of this creature, because if I prefer, and I will prefer, to take it from this angle, I have a background made by the building. And if I take it from the building, this lizard will be covered partly by the leaf. So in this particular situation, I just have this mobile phone picture and no camera picture at all, because it makes no sense to try it. And I have to say, maybe for 6 years or so, I don't change position of my subjects, of small subjects. So I don't place my frogs to a particular nice place, or I'm not catching the lizards to pose for me. I try to make it as much as possible as an in situ photograph. So I just enjoy this lizard and didn't photograph. Just for fun, this is the same lizard photographed night after after the walk through the forest, and this lizard slept in a front of our house. So finally I took it. And this is also the same lizard day after, on the maybe 5 meters away, and it's taken by a 90 millimeter as well. Speaking of lizard, sometimes it's very hard to find them and photograph, because this beautiful green lizard was green just for 10 seconds after I spotted first, and then it changed to brown because it found another male facing it, and it tries to make some display for keeping the territory. So this is exactly the same specimen, not just the species, but the same one as this one, just spotting the other lizard. Here's another analysis. It's taken also with 90 millimeters during the night walk. And as I started to travel because of herps, of lizards, snakes, and frogs, I really enjoy Costa Rica because they have a beautiful sort of lizards, especially this one. It's a helmeted lizard, helmeted basilisk, actually. And this was the first trip to Costa Rica. I saw it personally and I found it personally. It's maybe a very common lizard, but it's so well camouflaged during the day. It's so motionless, it's very hard to find it. And I found this one in the middle of our lodge, just waiting for me to take a picture. So after the dinner, I went outside with my torchlight and I found this lizard. And the great part of this lizard, it's very special for me, and it's almost motionless, even you are doing anything around. Some lizards, when spotted you on their favorite place, they run away and disappear. This kind of lizard, helmeted basilisk, is very patient. Maybe it's more patient than I am. So it was great to have opportunity to make a wide angle shot. This head shot is taken with 90 millimeter as well, so you can see all the scales which cover the beautiful lizard. And the fun part is that there are maybe not two same specimens. Every single lizard of the species looks slightly different. From different part of Costa Rica, they have different coloration, different patterns of the colors, and it's amazing.
Peter, during this, let's say, night shooting, which you are doing quite often of the lizards and frogs and so on, is it difficult to actually spot the animals? I know you are using flash gun, but I mean, I can imagine that within the forest where there's like thousands of leaves around, bushes, branches, trees. I mean, how do you find them?
I have to say that finding animals during the night is a little bit easier than daytime, because you only check the spot which is lightened by with your torchlight.
Okay.
So you can ignore the whole forest and you just focus for a circle which is lightened. Of course, there are much better finders than I am. There are people which are incredible in spotting the animals during the night. But after hundreds of hours spent in the night in a forest, I have some technique how to find it. And yes, it's much easier than during the day, because during the day you see everything. You see every single leaf, every single branch, and if you are looking for something, you have to check the whole branch from the basement to the top, and again the other branch, understand if this is leaf or is it just camouflage or some lizard or frog or something. So it's much easier to find the small stuff during the night, and especially the frogs, because they are in tropics. 90% of frogs are nighttime active, so they are hidden during the daytime and you can easily find them.
Okay, thank you.
Here's another example of the coloration of helmeted lizard. They are very variable, and I'm really happy I saw them personally. It's crazy because I didn't see a single one during my previous 6 trips, and I've seen 6 or 7 doing this particular trick. So sometimes it happens. I also used my 90mm for photographing sleeping lizard. This is tiny annulus lizard, which is maybe 3 centimeters in a body length, and the same for the tail. And here is a close-up again with 90mm of sleeping annulus, which is very beautiful colored. With after the rain, there are a lot of droplets on the body. So this is my very favorite stuff.
Peter, we can see that basically you are most probably using flash, and there are 2 questions, technical questions. One, what flash unit do you use for this lizard? And second, if you could talk also slightly about the settings of the new 90mm macro lens which we are using. So the flash and the settings of the 90mm.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I used 2 flashes or 2 setups. Now I prefer the Godox one. I use the Godox 350, I guess. I have by myself here 350. Yes, and I use several kinds of diffusers on the flash, because you cannot photograph them directly, because you have to soften the light. At this moment, I use Sinustech. Oh, it's invisible, so I try to do this.
Yeah.
Sinustech flash diffuser from Brendan from Australia. I really like his work. I really like his simple diffuser, which works very well. And I also use my custom made diffusers with a wider wide board, for example, for snakes or bigger animals, because sometimes the diffusers are made for direct lighting. So you put your flash on a camera and photograph from your hand, and it works perfectly. Many of my pictures were taken with off camera flash, and with this I use a different shape of my diffuser I built by myself, and I use much wider whiteboard, but the principle is all the same. And during the night I use the manual mode setting on my camera. I use higher f-stop, somewhere 5.6 or 8. Low ISO, it's 200, usually 250 or something, and time doesn't matter, so I use something like 100, 125 or 100. It's enough for lighting. And the flash is set to TTL. Sometimes I switch to manual mode. Usually, if you have placed your flash on your camera, it's in the same distance from the subject all the time. Manual mode of your flash is enough. But if I use off-camera flash, I change it time to time from manual to TTL. All depends how does it look like. So I'm really flexible in this.
And when the animals are actually not moving, do you use stack? I mean, in-camera stacking or even the bracketing for it?
I would love to, but I have to say that as most of my pictures are taken with one hand holding the camera, second hand holding the light, it's very hard to deal with the focus stacking from handheld. I know it's possible to make handheld photo stacking, but it's much better if you have placed your flash on camera and hold your camera by both of your arms, because there are a lot of shaking. You are moving there and back naturally, not by conscious. So yeah, so I have few stack pictures I will show later, but usually it's a one-shot picture, because I try to experiment with the lighting and with the direction of the light. So I have not many yet stacked pictures.
Okay.
So again, these are the examples. If I take the picture with the wider angle lens, this is 8 to 25 millimeter lens. I switched to 90 millimeter, and I took the detail of the head. It's just one of many examples how I use 90 millimeter. It was very far from being just 90mm scouting trip. I took pictures with all my stuff I took along with me. So here are examples where I used 90mm to make the overall portfolio colorful in terms of shapes and wide angle and macro angle and any angle you can imagine.
I love these frogs. I mean, right? You really love the shape, everything, the colors. It looks like a jelly gummy bear. You would like to eat it, but obviously you
it's
can't.
Kermit, Kermit-like frog. These frogs are nighttime active, and these frogs are called glass frogs. So if you see this frog from below, it's totally transparent. You can see internal organs, ventral, so you can see the blood inside. If they are pregnant, you can see the eggs in the females. So these are very special frogs. And whenever it's possible, I try to make a picture of at least one species. And this one, ghost glass frog, was my target for this trip. So I traveled to the place where they are active. So it was one of my favorite shot.
How far are you with the 90mm lens from this image or from the eyes of the snake from the previous image?
It all depends. If I am photographing wide angles, sometimes I'm just 2-3 centimeters from the frog. If I'm photographing macro, it depends if I use 90mm or 60mm. I will talk about it later, but now I can tease that for the whole body photograph of the frogs, 90mm is too long because you have to be too far from the subject itself. It's very hard to deliver the light. And this frog is 3 centimeters long. It's a very small one. But I also photograph the red-eye tree frogs, which are 5 or 6 centimeters big, and it's very hard to deal with the distance from the frog. So I never know which distance I take. I only focus myself for making it well framed. So sometimes I'm close, like in this situation. Sometimes I'm so far that I can hardly see what happens on the LCD. It all depends. So that's why I use, for snakes, for example, because they are mostly bigger, I used 8 to 25mm lens because I can get closer and more wide angle, and the snake is in a whole body across the shot. If I choose the idea to make a portrait, I just switch to macro lens, and also I get as close as possible for delivering nice lighting. So this is the ghost glass frog. It's a portrait of the eyes, which are very special for this species. And this is the glass frog from bigger distance, where the glass frog is the hole itself across the image. And most of these images from the night are almost no crop. I never crop the macro pictures because I try to get as close as possible to make it sense. This is an example how it looks like if you lighten the glass frog from below. So here is one glass frog resting on the leaf, and I took this picture also with 90mm with a flash under the leaf.
It's like an X-ray image, right?
It is. They are really like X-ray frogs.
By the way, for these images, have you ever tried? There's a question from Mark. Have you ever tried ring flash?
Yes, 18 years ago, I used it first time and last time. Ring flash is not, from my point of view, it's not a macro lighting. It's a very hard macro lighting. The reason is that the flash ring is in front of the lens, and you have no way how to diffuse the light. So it makes very hard light. I have seen several tweaks where the people remove the ring flash, place it with some holders more behind the top of the lens, but it's very expensive to make this make this crazy holdings. It's much easier to use the ordinary flash. So I never use a macro ring flash for macro.
Yeah. Which does not necessarily say that ring flash is not usable. I mean, I know many people that are using it. I mean, like dentists, dermatologists,
Of
technical
course,
photographers who are shooting technical small subjects where you need a constant light all over. Because while this is something totally different with the wildlife photography and so on, you probably want to have more like contrast to one side to the other. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So of course, I totally forget for dentists because I'm not one. Yeah, but in terms of wildlife photography, especially the frogs, if you can see in their eyes, they are reflecting the whole setup you use for the photography. And the frogs are great examples how I train myself, how I choose the shape of the diffuser for wildlife photography, because not the insects, not the lizards much, but the frogs with their large eyes reflects all the setup you have, and they say how exactly you diffuse the flash. So that's the reason why I have these plastic, I don't know if it's visible, plastic frogs. And these frogs are my, here.
Yeah, now we can see.
It's a training frogs, training lizard. And these lizards learn me a lot about using flash in wildlife photography. And sometimes, time to time, I take some toys from my girls, because small toys for girls has large glassy eyes, and the reflection is very same as the frogs have. So I train myself on these three tools. So yeah, if you look inside the eyes, you will see how softly diffused the light is, and you can compare to the other sources of light. You will see the difference.
Mhm.
So here another example. We were in a beautiful frog reservation in reserve in Costa Rica. So I have a lot of shots of my target species because we had great guide. And this is example how it looks like if you try to get the whole frog, which is 7 centimeters long, with 90 millimeter lens. This was the edge of possibility of taking the picture, because I have to be so far that if I would go more far, I wouldn't see the frog on the LCD, because I hold my lens by my hand over the frog. So for this kind of pictures, I guess 60 millimeter is much more easier to deal with. But if you want to get some close up, for example, this is the same frog as before. This is the same frog as this one, same species, different specimen. This is their resting position, and this is their active position. But if you would like to take some real detail, for example, the Sauron eye from the frog, 90 millimeter is a gem. It's a perfect lens for this details with no cropping necessary. So I switch.
So basically, if I understand it right, the major obstacle of using 90 millimeter lens in this night shooting is that you are there alone. You have no assistant to hold your light above the animal. So basically, you need to have your one hand, let's say, stretched in front, holding the flashlight or whatever light you are using, and in another hand you're holding the camera with 90 millimeter lens.
Yes, let's say this, but in a real time, in a real world, it's same obstacle if you use 150, 400 for taking the same picture, because you can say that the main obstacle of this huge lens is that you have to be on the other part of the forest to get this picture. But the real obstacle is this is not the main topic you have to use this lens. The main topic you have to use 90 millimeter is real macro. I mean details, everything from 1 centimeter lower. This lens is perfect. If somebody is wishing to use this lens for everything, I think it's not the lens which delivers everything, but it delivers the details. I'm going there very soon. So here are the examples. I use the lens for real details of bright eyes, This eye belongs to the most photographed frog in the world, I guess. It's a red-eyed tree frog. And I was lucky enough that I seen during this trip two different morphs of this frog. This particular one is the most famous, with red eyes, green backs, and with a red blue coloration on the sides. But there is also one different, which is also different coloration of the eye. If you see this eye, it's red eye. The name is red-eyed tree frog. But here is the different morph of the same species, and it has different, how to say, different shade of the red on the eyes, and it lacks the blue side color. So this is the detail of the pure. It's more purple than red. So I cannot resist. When I saw it in my hotel complex, I have to photograph a lot of picture of this frog, and I was lucky enough that this may be the response for one of the questions we had before. This particular place was lack of the birds. There were nothing. If I see, maybe I've seen 6 species of birds, everything was disappeared. It was very dry. It was on the Pacific part of the country. But after the dark, there was a small pond which was covered with the frogs. So if I just spend there daytime and I sleep during the night, I would say avoid this place. It's awful. But if I will ever travel to Costa Rica again, I will spend there at least 2 nights, because the frog pond is special. And it was insane, because there were literally on almost every leaf around the pond, there was some frog, including the red-eyed trees, hourglass frogs, glass frogs, and I cannot stop. So I stopped, I guess, at 3 a.m. So here's another angle of shooting of this specimen, but different approach. It's I guess it's a 9mm lens. So here you can see the different frogs which I took in the same place as the red-eyed tree frog. This is also taken with a 90mm, and this is example how I use 90mm in a different way. As I described, I use most of times I use my camera hold in my hand and flash either on the camera or in my hand. This particular picture was taken from the tripod because I noticed that there's some light decoration across the pond. So I tried to use it as a background for my picture. So I found the way where the background was facing behind the frog. I placed my camera on a tripod, and I also wish to have some more lightened leaves than from the single flash. So I started my lifetime mode. And again, it's the same like with the owl. I started my exposure. I get close to the frog, make the flash lighten the frog, and I let the other exposure time to slightly more lighten the other parts of the leaf, and of course the background circles. And that was the background of this picture.
Nice.
So not necessarily has to be taken from as a detail. I have a detailed picture of the same species here, but this is a different approach with no assistant at all.
More artistic, I would say.
Yeah, of course. I try to change from documentary photos to artistic to different. So that's what I prefer. Here are another perfect frogs in Costa Rica. It's poison dart frogs or blue jean frogs. And again, this is just an example how this species is changing in Costa Rica, because this is from one part of Costa Rica and this is from the other parts. It's the same species, but it lacks the blue jeans. It's more black socks or something. And the coloration on the backs is quite different. So I was very happy to find one.
So that is where Levi Strauss actually learned the blue jeans, right?
Yeah. So there are some examples of the small stuff. I mean, insects. For the insects, it's perfect. For spiders and insects, 90 millimeter is a real gem. The only problem is to find it. If you find it, if you are looking for it the night, it's much easier than during the daytime. Here you can see this simple view through the forest. Somewhere here, there could be a snake. There should be hidden helmeted lizard. Here could be a bird. There could be some mantis or something. And if you are not catching every single leaf, you are not controlling leaf to leaf, you are unable to find some well camouflaged species. So this is just a view. This is example how I take the pictures. This is the picture with 90 millimeter. And if I prefer to make it more wide, I switch to 825 and make it more artistic, or let's say more contextual picture. So that's the way how I use both tips. And here is the trick, because if you are using 90 millimeter lens, nobody knows how exactly the species was big, because you can get so close and so makes small stuff so big that nobody understands it's so tiny. So here are a few examples how it looks like in the nature, and on the picture is the same, this small spot taken with 90 millimeters. It's this beautiful beetle. Another example, this is like a bird poo, but if you get closer and photograph, it's a beautiful plant hopper. And this is my masterpiece. I really love tree hoppers. It's a special kind of insects which are very beautifully shaped with horns and other stuff. And I found during my walk through the forest this beauty. This is by my phone. And this is the beauty from the close-up. It has, I don't know, 3 or 4 millimeters at the dimensions. And of course, it is so tiny that even if you use your 90 millimeter with 8 aperture, it's still not enough. So this is exactly the way, or the subject where you have to use stacked photograph. But the wrong part of this is that everything is still moving. If you are walking through the forest, you can notice they are a little shaking by small wind. You are not dealing with this with the birds because it's okay. With lizards, it's okay. With grasshoppers, it's almost okay because they are big sized. But in 3 millimeter sized insect, it's very hard to get the insect in a viewfinder. So I deal with this for 30 seconds. It was the only time I had before it flew away. And I took 5 pictures. These are the original pictures. So sometimes there is a part of the wings sharp. Sometimes there is a headshot. Sometimes there is something in the front and so on. This is not with an internal focus stacking tool, because in this term, I have to place my camera on tripod, focus perfectly, and make it do its job. But if it's windy, it actually makes no sense, because the wind will shake with the subject, the camera will take the wrong series, and it's impossible to get it. So I tried it handheld. I stuck it together. It's not perfect, but I know that I can do 5-8 picture stacked photograph handheld, and again the stabilization helps very well. So I hope I will find this beautiful creature next time, and I will have more chances to get the picture.
I wonder if some kind of tripod with this kind of crocodile clam would actually help in the reality, in this practice, to actually keep the leaf with the insect still, so that the leaf doesn't move in the wind.
The problem is in tropics there is no how to say cold period of the day, because in our country, if you are going out at 5 a.m., everything is breathing, the flies are motionless, you can hold the leaf with the fly, prepare everything, it's perfect. But in tropics, it's between 20 degrees to 40 degrees and the insects are still active. And as I mentioned, if I would use something like this, some holder or some clutch to hold it, this tree hopper would fly away. I would not have a single picture. So of course, I'm making steps for the perfect picture. For the first time, I took one single picture. If I say, okay, it needs some stacking, I try the stacking handheld. If it will be patient enough, I will be closer. If it will be patient enough, I will place it on a tripod. Everything would happen. But in this particular situation, the tree hopper was very active. It disappeared within a few seconds.
I see.
This is the situation where I could use stacking photography, because this particular species was still. It was there when we went to the dinner, and after dinner I saw it in the same place. I returned for my camera, and it was perfect for this kind of photography. I noticed even one strange thing with a 90mm, because I will use my pen. If you photograph something with a macro lens, especially, you need to have the same direction of the insect as your sensor, and you will achieve the best depth of field in terms of sharp head to the tail. But if you are photographed with 90mm, the subject is not this size. The subject is sized of the final part of the pen.
Front tip.
Just a few millimeters, and it's very hard to find the right angle. Because if you have a tree hopper, it's very easy. You will see the front part of tree hopper, the latest part, and you can move very widely to make it perfect. But with 5-6mm subject, it's very hard to get the right angle, especially if it's moving. So I found this one particularly hard. Of course, you can take details of everything in the forest. You can take details of the leaves. This is not the example. This is example of the tree hopper, which looks like the leaf. So this is just one part of wings of this katydid. It's a dead leaf katydid, basically eating something, and it's eating itself old skin, which was going out. So this is a picture taken from 90mm. To have more context, I use A825. So I have both version.
It's actually amazing how you switch from total wide angle, which is 825, to a wonderful macro lens, and it gives you like two totally different images of the one and the same thing. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, yeah,
because it helps if you are walking during the night, you find something. It usually is more or less still, so you can focus for the details. You can understand, okay, it has great head, it has a nice situation, it has a nice wings, so it helps me. And of course, I use 2 or 3 lenses during my night walks, always ready. So after I take wide angle, I take detail and so on. So it helps again to make the portfolio more rich. This alien it was crazy. My first time I saw this alien. It's a grasshopper actually, and this is the profile of the grasshopper. I never seen it before. So this is front view and this is side view. Again, this is particularly the picture which really asked to be stacked. It asked me, Peter, use your stacking tool, use your stacking feature from your camera. But actually it went away, and I didn't have opportunity to make the stacking work with this. But this is actually maybe aperture 8. I can check it because it's interesting. How small is depth of the field? This is 7.1, but with 90 millimeter, and it's just a fraction of millimeter depth of field.
Yeah, we have to realize that basically it is 180 millimeter, right?
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
exactly.
the crop factor, so it's extremely long lens. Yeah.
And this particular picture is showing what is 90 millimeters great for, and it's a pure macro. These are details of the fur of caterpillar. So this is the whole caterpillar, which was very small itself. It was 1 centimeter long caterpillar, and the picture before was the detail of the fur inside the caterpillar. And this is exactly, if you are looking for this kind of pictures, 90 millimeter is great. This is shot of the head of caterpillar, and it's perfectly covered by all the feathers that it's impossible to get closer or find some open area with the head. And it perfectly shows how the caterpillar is covered and protected by the feathers, by the fur.
Mhm.
And what I noticed as well, that there is no comparison measurement to show how small the stuff you photograph with 90 millimeter is. This is really tiny ant from Costa Rica, and there are 2 ants sharing something sweet. And this is this is last picture from the Costa Rica, but I have a few more information. My feedback for 90 millimeter. As I noticed, there is no comparison measurement how small the stuff is. So if you will present something 3 millimeters long, nobody will see the difference between this and 5 centimeter long. But you will notice one very important thing, and it is a difference in a closest focusing area. Here is example how it looks like in 3 different macro lenses from Olympus or OM system. It's 30 millimeters, 60 millimeters, and 90 millimeters. If you use the shortest focusing distance in these 3 lenses, you will be this far from your subject. So for example, if you are shooting 1:1 with 60 millimeter, you are 11 centimeters from the subject, from the front of the subject, which means enough space to deliver the light. If you are using 30 millimeters and you use the shortest focusing distance, it's so close, it's very hard to get the light among the lens and the subject. So it's sometimes one can say, okay, if I place some Raynox or some another tool between or extension tubes, for example, between the lens and the body, or I use Rhinox, it will deliver 2:1 as well. Of course, it will, maybe, but it will be very hard to get some light among this hole between the subject. It's quite different in 90 millimeters. In 90 millimeters, it's 11 centimeter in to the front of the frog or insect or anything. If you're shooting 1:1, and if you're shooting 2:1, it's still something around 9 millimeters, 9 centimeter. So it's still great distance to deliver the light and make it very, very soft, and that's great part of this lens. Because if you use the special lenses from the other brands, and I use it in the past, I noticed if you wish to get 2:1, you are very short, maybe 4 centimeters or even shorter.
Yeah,
it's very
we
hard.
have to realize. Sorry to interrupt you, Peter. We have to realize that when shooting 2:1 with 90 millimeter, we are actually shooting subject which is only 4 millimeters in size, and it covers the whole image basically. Yeah,
Yes.
you have it here. Sorry, I didn't know that.
So you didn't know that I have prepared this. Yes, this is a comparison of the ratio, because there are endless discussion if the 2:1 is exactly 2:1 or maybe 4:1 or something. 2:1, 1:1 is always the same. But if you use the full frame and a Micro Four Third, you will see quite a different thing on your camera. So this is example. This is 3.5 centimeter long frog. it's exactly almost true because it's a male of this tree frog. So on your full frame camera, you will see from the snow to the wind across the whole image. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. But to see this one, you need just something 1-to-2 ratio on Micro Four Third. If you will be shooting 1-to-1 with your 60 millimeter or 90 millimeter, you will see this crop from the situation, and you will see the same if you use 2-to-1 on full frame. And with 90 millimeter, you will see 2-to-1 on your Micro Four, which is the same what you will see in 4-to-1 in full frame. So this is the difference. And here's an example from my kitchen. It was taken yesterday. I noticed that we have spring visitors in our kitchen. They are tiny ants, and I attracted them by myself with this sweet syrup. So I placed a few drops of syrup on our kitchen, wait for a few minutes, and they came to me to see what happens with a sweet sauce. And I photographed this picture because this is something you will see if you photograph 1-to-1 in full frame. It's a 4 millimeter long end. This is 1-to-1, and this is 2-to-1 on Micro Four. So this is 90 millimeter lens, the same size of the end, but you can see the different. And that was the place where I understand it's very hard to get the plane level to your subject, because it's 4 millimeter long ends, almost invisible, and you have to find the right angle to make head and the back sharp. So this is one shot image. I also used some handheld stacking. Even I tried some tripod stacking. The problem is the end itself is motionless, but it always move with the mandibles in the front. So I didn't stack it together. I will try tomorrow maybe, but I'm really sure it will be very hard to make the stack picture if I will have 15 different position of frontal antennas of the end. So I will see. And this is the end. This is the collection of my pictures from Costa Rica I took with 90 millimeter. I think it's a great lens if you wish to use the lens for pure macro photography. There is no rival on the market, I guess. It's autofocus, stabilized, used internal stacking macro. For this stuff, it's incredible, and it's perfect for lighting the subject because there is a lot of space between the subject and the lens. If you wish to use this lens for bigger size subjects like frogs, lizards, I think you will maybe struggle a bit.
Well, I mean, amazing pictures, Peter. Amazing pictures, not just the ones from the 90 millimeter, which we are seeing now, but also the other ones which we saw before. Also those from 825, as you change the angles from 90 to 825. I mean, for me, it's really like a whole new world. With 90 millimeter lens, I have to say that the whole new world appeared in front of my eyes, even though I have tried to use the 30 millimeter, 60 millimeter before, but the 90 is just different. But yeah, let's have a look if there are some questions. Let me see. Yeah, there is a question from Paul. Paul is asking, do you use manual focus or one of the subject detection modes? I guess this is a question not towards the macro, to the insect, but in general, when you are shooting birds, for example, or animals, mammals.
Yeah, if we can split it. If I'm photographing the animals like birds and mammals, I usually start with the bird detection or mammal detection. And if it doesn't work, I just simply take it off. But usually it works, 90% it works, and I'm confident with this. in terms of macro, I never use the detection for the macro stuff because the shape is different. It's not calibrated for macro, I guess. So I used either the autofocus just to find the plane of focus I would like to start with, or I use the manual focus with sharpening or focusing by my movement, not the movement with the lens ring, but the movement of the camera. And I have activated illumination of the focus plane, so I can see what is or what is not focused on.
Mm-hmm. There's a question from Stefan. Do you use multiple bodies with lens attached ready? Just thinking about the condensation on sensor in tropics.
For my trips, I usually use two bodies. They are set at the same setting, so I have saved to my custom modes in a set file, and after I have available second body, I upload my settings so the cameras are equal to each other. So time to time, I use two bodies. I have on my backpack attached the holder from Peak Design, holder of the second body. So sometimes I just switch the bodies. The problem is that I have to switch flash as well, or the remote control for the flash. So sometimes I use this, or sometimes I'm just going light. So I've attached one lens on my camera and two other lenses on my side backpack or side pack, and I change it in a field. And yes, after 2 weeks in Costa Rica, I changed my lens in heavy rain, and even I have a really great technique how to change it very quickly. It's a split of second. After one change, my lens was covered by moisture, so I have to wait for a while because I didn't have the second camera accessible. It was back in the lodge and I was 500 meters in the forest. So yes, I have to wait for a while, but it was not how to say, it wasn't condensated for a long time. It was just for 5-10 minutes, and after it disappeared. It was great. So of course, in a high humidity, it's great to have time to dry out your equipment. I do it all the time. After I return to my resort, I open my backpack and try everything go out my backpack, because this is it's very hard.
But the two bodies basically are the basic setup always.
Well, for me, it's two body is a necessity on my trips. It's my lesson from my second trip to tropics 20 years ago, when I only had one camera body, and it was stolen after 2 days in Ecuador, and I only have two lenses but no body. So I traveled 3 weeks across the Ecuador with two lenses but no body. So I every time take two bodies.
Right. One question from Shireen. Do you use any of the Raynoxes with your setups?
To be honest, I have Raynox. It's, I think, 250. But there are some different sizes, but I have 250. But I almost never use it. Until I first time traveled with 90 millimeter, I almost always ignored everything smaller than 1 centimeter, because I knew that it will be hard to take the picture of. So I focused for lizard, snakes, and so on. But after this trip, I noticed that I will search more for tiny stuff, because I found it's very colorful. Now I have the equipment which is able to make the picture for me, and I don't have to heavily crop the 60 millimeter picture. Now it will be pure 90 millimeter picture. So I do have Raynox, but I almost never use it.
Sitting somewhere in the shelf, I guess. What about peaking? I mean, focus peaking, most probably in the macro shooting.
Yes. I use focus peaking with the manual focusing of the tiny stuff. Yes, I use it.
Mm-hmm. Out of the 3 macro lenses available, 30, 60, 90, you mentioned, which one would you prefer regarding the bokeh?
Bokeh. It's very hard to say. I have to say, if you photograph with the 90 millimeters close enough, you will get great bokeh. It was. I can find the picture of the glass frog, and I think it was great bokeh. I will try it again. Here. No. So if Thomas will, yeah, yes.
Yeah,
So this is the picture. I think it will be hard to get with a 60 millimeters, I guess. But I never use these lenses for, let's say, close-up. There's a way of to make a close-up photography for butterflies, dragonflies, small lizard during the daytime. I always use zoom lens or telephoto lens. It's much better in terms of disturbing or not disturbing, for example, and the bokeh combination. So I would every time prefer 40 to 150 millimeter, 2.8 at least, for daytime close-up, daytime picture of dragonfly, then photographing this topic with the macro lens, because with macro lens, 60, even 90 millimeters, you have to get close to the subject, and it disturbs the subject. So from these three lenses, I would never use these lenses for close-up photography with bokeh, where bokeh is necessary. But 90 millimeters and 60 millimeters will be very close to each other in particular situation.
Obviously, the 90 has the stabilization, but yeah, I mean, sure, I absolutely agree with you. One more question. Have you tried finding and shooting the resplendent quetzales in Costa Rica? I have no idea what this is, but you will probably know.
Not on this trip, because this trip was my 7th trip, and I photographed the quetzals during my previous trips. I will find the pictures. If you wait for a few seconds, I will find it.
And what is it, by the way, if you could just explain to us?
What is it? This is the most beautiful bird in
Okay.
maybe on the planet. Right after the birds of paradise. It's a very beautiful green long-tailed bird, and I will find one of my pictures. It's here, very close.
And in the meantime, because I know you are multitasking, so you can be looking for the image, you can also in the same time reply to one more question. That is, if you have tried combination of the teleconverter with the 90 millimeter lens, 1.4 conversion.
Yes,
with 90.
I tried it with the kitchen ends you saw before, but I found it too hard to deal with, because maybe for fungus, for flowers, for anything which is motionless, it would be great. But for ants and anything which is live, 2:1 is quite enough to be crazy. And after you attach the extender and try to get the picture of this small stuff, it's almost impossible, because it's moving slightly there and here. So I try it. I have some pictures, but I would never prefer it for this kind of photography. Maybe for, as I mentioned, for the fungus, it will be great. For mosses and lichen, it's perfect for stacking photos. But for the live creatures, I would not even try.
Yeah, so we have to basically say, even from the experience which I have with other photographers here in Czech, for example, there are people who really are specializing in shooting the tiniest fungus, as you mentioned, these kind of tiny mushrooms, or how you call them, because they are 1 millimeter size, but then you can see them like in full frame image, so it is amazing for this type of images. But as you say, for something that's moving, it's really hard. So this is it. This is the quetzal. What is it? Quetzal.
Resplendent quetzal. This is the male, and this is the female.
Okay.
The male is more beautiful, of course, because in a bird realm, it's the rule. The male is more attractive than female. Female is more important, but male is more attractive. As a human, it's easy. The female is more beautiful, even important.
I was wondering what are you about to say, you know, be careful. Okay, so we've got, I think, last question, which I'm not sure I fully understand. Is the 90mm an EF lens?
I think, I'm not sure if I understand it well, but there are lenses which are, no, it's a zoom. Maybe it's internal focus, I guess, isn't it?
Oh, internal focus. Oh, yes. I mean,
It's
90mm has,
Yeah,
yeah, it does have internal focusing, obviously, and there are actually two lens elements which are moving towards each other. You know, so that's why that is one of the reasons why the focusing is extremely fast. Obviously precise, but also very fast with this lens.
and it doesn't change the size. So there are some lenses from Laowa, for example, the manual one, which are crazy enlarging the subject, but they are changing the size of the physical size of the lens. So if you need to reach the highest enlargement, the size is maybe 2 times bigger than the original one.
Right. And last but not least, I think let's have this as a last question, because it's a general question. I can even reply it. My question is not counting the professional Olympus bodies, which mid-range or beginners cameras is good for macro. Thanks so much. I mean, I would absolutely say that today it will be OM5.
Yes.
Which is like a downsized version of our EM1 Mark III, which was previously our flagship camera. Amazing camera with lots of features. And if you check this OM System YouTube channel, you will actually find quite a couple of talks about the OM5 camera. And it's really even smaller than OM1. It's not like high-end professional, but it still is like sealed, you know, against water, dust. So even in this Costa Rica tropical rain, which Peter was showing us at the beginning, you know, when the camera was totally splashed with water, even OM5 can withstand these kind of harsh conditions. And it's very fast as well. So, I mean, I would go with OM5 personally.
Yes.
If you want to, let's say, start in the system.
For light traveling, light photography, and a lot of features, it's a pure, clear choice for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Peter, lots of thanks from many people from around the world. So thank you again. Thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you for taking the time to prepare the presentation, and obviously for taking these amazing pictures and sharing them with us. We can also once again share your website, which is sulasula.com. So if you don't know Peter's images, go to sulasula.com and enjoy the gallery of amazing images, which since 2016 have all been shot on Olympus and now OM System cameras. And Peter, we hope that you will have yet another nice trip to some exotic places.
I hope
then
so.
Next time we will see some images from other countries, not just Costa Rica. Are you planning something?
Yes, I'm heading to Galapagos within one month, so I hope it will be interesting as well. So maybe we will see again. And thank you to everybody for your patience. It's almost 2 hours again. I don't know how we make it. So it's a real pleasure to share my experiences with you. And if you have any questions, write down to the YouTube channel or to my email. And stay shooting, stay enjoying the nature. It's beautiful and it's worth it.
Thanks, Peter, again. And I just have to explain, why does it always take such a long time, the presentations? Because we are Czech, and Czech people are talkative. So sorry for that. And have a nice day. Have a nice rest of the day, whether it's afternoon, evening, or wherever you are from. And have a good light, all of you. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.